Saddam Hussein was a name that once caused the world to hold its breath. For nearly 25 years, he was the president of Iraq, a country rich with ancient history and modern oil. His story is not just about a single man, it is about power and how it can be used to build a nation or break it apart. He presented himself as a great Arab leader, a modernizer who brought schools and hospitals to his people. He wanted to be seen as a strong man who could stand up to the world's biggest powers. To many outside Iraq and to many inside, he was known for something much darker: his complete and total control over his country through fear. His rule was a complex mix of progress and pain. In the early years, especially during the 1970s, Iraq's oil money was used to improve life for many people. The government built roads, improved healthcare, and started programs to teach everyone how to read and write. These were real changes that made a difference in people's lives. But this progress came at a very high price. To stay in power, Saddam Hussein created a government where no one could challenge him. He built a massive security force, a network of police and spies who watched everyone. Disagreeing with him or his Ba'ath Party was not just a political difference, it was a crime that could lead to prison, torture, or death. His ambition was not limited to Iraq's borders. Saddam dreamed of making Iraq the most powerful nation in the Arab world. He wanted to dominate the region and control the vast oil resources of the Persian Gulf. This dream led him to start long and terrible wars with his neighbors. These conflicts cost hundreds of thousands of lives and left his own country in ruins, burdened by debt and isolated from the international community. The image he projected of strength and victory often hid the reality of defeat and destruction. The world watched as he challenged other nations, creating crises that drew in countries from across the globe. Ultimately, the story of Saddam Hussein is a story of ruin. His thirst for power and his brutal methods turned his country into a place of deep suffering. The very things he did to make himself strong, the wars, the repression, the constant state of conflict, led to his downfall. In the end, the world that he had so often challenged came together to remove him from power. His fall was as dramatic as his rise, ending with him hiding in a small hole in the ground. His life serves as a powerful lesson about how a leader's choices can shape the destiny of millions for better and, in his case, for much worse. Saddam Hussein was born on April 28, 1937, in a small village called Al-Auja near the city of Tikrit. His family were poor farmers, and he grew up without a father. Life in the village was hard and opportunities were few. As a boy, he did not have a stable home and was raised by his mother and a stepfather who was reportedly cruel to him. This difficult childhood likely shaped the person he would become. He learned early on that the world could be a tough place and that to survive, one had to be tougher. He dreamed of a life beyond the poverty and dust of his village, a life with more power and respect. When he was a teenager, he made a decision that would change his life forever. He moved to Baghdad, the capital city of Iraq, to live with his uncle, Kairala Talfa. His uncle was a strong nationalist, someone who believed deeply in Arab pride and independence. He was also an army officer who hated the British influence that still lingered in Iraq. Living with his uncle, Saddam was introduced to a new world of political ideas. He went to school in Baghdad and began to learn about the power struggles that were shaping his country and the entire Middle East. This was where his political education truly began. In 1957, at the age of 20, Saddam took a critical step. He joined the Ba'ath Party. This was a political group with a powerful message. The Ba'ath Party wanted to unite all Arab nations into one great state. It was socialist, meaning it wanted the government to control the economy for the good of the people, and it was fiercely nationalist, wanting to end all foreign control in the region. For a young man like Saddam, who was ambitious and looking for a cause, the Ba'ath Party offered a clear path. It gave him a purpose and a group of like-minded people who were also determined to change Iraq. His commitment to the party was tested very quickly. In 1959, he was part of a small team of Ba'athists who tried to assassinate Iraq's leader at the time, Prime Minister Abdel Karim Qasim. The attempt failed dramatically. The Prime Minister was only wounded, and in the chaos, Saddam was shot in the leg. To avoid being captured and executed, he had to flee the country. He escaped first to Syria and then to Egypt, living as an exile. But even far from home, his reputation as a loyal and daring party member grew. This failed assassination attempt was not the end of his story. It was the violent beginning of his rise. After years in exile, Saddam Hussein returned to Iraq when the Ba'ath Party briefly seized power in 1963. However, their rule was short-lived, and when the government was overthrown again, Saddam was caught and put in prison. But he was not someone who would quietly accept his fate. In 1966, he managed to escape from jail, a bold move that made him a hero within the party. He immediately went back to work, helping to rebuild the Ba'ath Party from the shadows. He became a key organizer, known for his intelligence, his ruthlessness, and his ability to get things done. He was positioning himself to be at the center of power when the party made its next move. That moment came in 1968. Saddam was a leading figure in a successful and bloodless coup that brought the Ba'ath Party back to power for good. His older relative, Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, became the new president of Iraq. But while al-Bakr had the title, Saddam quickly took control of the real levers of power. He was appointed vice president and head of the country's security services. From this position, he began to build his own network of loyal followers. He placed people he trusted from his hometown of Tikrit into key jobs in the government, the army, and the secret police. He was carefully building a state that answered not to the president, but to him. During the 1970s, Saddam was the true power behind the throne. He directed major government policies that changed the face of Iraq. The most important of these was the nationalization of Iraq's oil industry in 1972. This meant taking control of the country's vast oil wealth from foreign companies and putting it in the hands of the Iraqi government. With record-high oil prices, this move brought a massive amount of money into the country. Saddam used this wealth to fund social programs, building modern infrastructure and improving education and healthcare. This made him popular with many Iraqis who saw him as a modernizer building a stronger nation. By 1979, President al-Bakr was old and in poor health. Saddam decided it was time to take the final step. On July 16, 1979, he forced al-Bakr to resign and officially became the president of Iraq. He wasted no time in securing his position. Just days later, he called a meeting of Ba'ath Party leaders. In a chilling spectacle that was filmed and broadcast, he read out the names of dozens of high-ranking officials, accusing them of being traitors and plotting against him. These men were dragged from the room, many of them to be executed. It was a brutal and public message to everyone in Iraq. Saddam Hussein was now in absolute control, and any opposition would be eliminated without mercy. For the average person, life in Iraq under Saddam Hussein was filled with contradictions. On one hand, the government provided things that many other countries in the region did not. Education was free all the way through university, and so was healthcare. The government launched a huge campaign to end illiteracy, which was very successful and even won an award from the United Nations. For a time, especially when oil money was flowing in the 1970s, the standard of living for many families improved. People had access to electricity and clean water, and new roads connected cities and towns. It seemed like Iraq was on a path to becoming a modern, prosperous country. However, this progress was built on a foundation of intense fear. Saddam's government was a police state. A massive network of secret police, known as the Mukhabarat, watched society at every level. Neighbors spied on neighbors, and children were sometimes encouraged to report on their parents. People were afraid to speak their minds, even in their own homes. Any comment that could be seen as critical of Saddam or the Ba'ath Party could lead to a visit from the secret police in the middle of the night. People would disappear, taken to prisons where torture was common. No one was safe, not even high-ranking officials in his own government. A powerful cult of personality was built around Saddam Hussein. His picture was everywhere, in every government office, every school, every shop, and on huge billboards in every city. He was shown as a kind father, a brave warrior, a wise statesman, and a devout Muslim. The state-controlled television and newspapers praised him constantly, presenting him as the one great leader who could protect Iraq from its enemies. He even had a novel written that was said to be authored by him, and commissioned a version of the Quran allegedly written using his own blood. This was all designed to make him seem larger than life, a figure who was inseparable from the nation itself. For those who did not fit into Saddam's vision for Iraq, life was especially dangerous. His government was dominated by Sunni Arabs from his own region. Even though Sunni Arabs were a minority in the country, the Shia Muslim majority and the ethnic Kurdish population in the north were treated with deep suspicion. They were seen as potential threats to his rule and were often denied power and resources. Any attempt by these groups to ask for more rights or autonomy was met with extreme violence. For them, Saddam's rule was not about progress or modernization. It was about oppression, discrimination, and the constant threat of a brutal crackdown. In 1980, just 1 year after becoming president, Saddam Hussein made a fateful decision. He launched a massive invasion of his neighbor, Iran. He had several reasons for starting the war. The year before, Iran had gone through its Islamic revolution, which brought a radical Shia government to power. Saddam, a Sunni leader, feared that this revolution would inspire Iraq's own Shia majority to rise up against him. He also saw an opportunity. He believed Iran's army was weak and disorganized after the revolution, and he hoped to seize oil-rich territory and establish Iraq as the dominant power in the Persian Gulf. He expected a quick and easy victory. He was terribly wrong. The Iran-Iraq war turned into a brutal 8-year conflict, one of the longest and deadliest wars of the 20th century. It became a bloody stalemate with trench warfare that was grimly similar to World War I. Both sides suffered enormous casualties, with hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians killed. The war drained Iraq's economy, turning a wealthy nation into one burdened by massive foreign debt. During the conflict, Saddam's regime used chemical weapons, including mustard gas, against Iranian troops and later against his own people. Despite the horrific cost, the war ended in 1988 with no clear winner. The borders remained unchanged and both countries were left devastated. Just 2 years after the devastating war with Iran ended, Saddam turned his attention to another neighbor. In August 1990, Iraqi forces invaded and quickly conquered the small, oil-rich country of Kuwait. Saddam accused Kuwait of stealing Iraqi oil and driving down prices, which hurt Iraq's ability to recover from the war. He also claimed that Kuwait was historically part of Iraq. This blatant act of aggression shocked the world. The invasion gave Saddam control of a huge portion of the world's oil reserves, and many feared he would not stop there. The international community, led by the United Nations, immediately condemned the invasion and demanded that Iraq withdraw. The world's response was swift and decisive. When Saddam refused to leave Kuwait, the United Nations authorized the use of force. The United States assembled a massive coalition of countries from around the world to confront him. In January 1991, the coalition launched a massive air campaign, followed by a ground assault, known as Operation Desert Storm. The war was short and one-sided. Iraq's army, which had once seemed so powerful, was completely overwhelmed by the coalition's superior technology and training. Within weeks, Kuwait was liberated, and the Iraqi army was forced into a humiliating retreat. Saddam had gambled and lost, leaving his country defeated and isolated. Saddam Hussein's rule was not only defined by wars against other countries, but also by a relentless war against segments of his own population. He saw any group that was not completely loyal to him as an enemy within. The largest of these groups were the Kurds, an ethnic minority living in the mountainous regions of northern Iraq. The Kurds had long dreamed of having their own independent state, a dream that Saddam was determined to crush. Throughout his reign, he carried out brutal campaigns to suppress any Kurdish desires for autonomy. Villages were destroyed, and thousands of people were forcibly relocated to other parts of the country. The most horrific chapter in this campaign of repression came near the end of the Iran-Iraq war. In 1988, Saddam's government launched what it called the Anfal campaign against the Kurds. This was a systematic and genocidal attack designed to eliminate Kurdish resistance. The Iraqi army swept through the countryside, rounding up and executing tens of thousands of Kurdish men, women and children. The peak of this brutality occurred in the town of Halabja. On March 16, 1988, Iraqi warplanes dropped a deadly cocktail of chemical weapons on the town, killing an estimated 5,000 civilians in a matter of minutes. The world saw shocking images of entire families lying dead in the streets, a testament to the regime's cruelty. Iraq's Shia Muslim majority, who lived mostly in the south, also suffered terribly under Saddam's rule. After Iraq's defeat in the 1991 Gulf War, President George H.W. Bush encouraged the Iraqi people to rise up and overthrow Saddam. Believing they had American support, both the Shia in the south and the Kurds in the north launched massive rebellions. For a moment, it seemed like Saddam's regime might collapse. However, the promised American help never came, and Saddam turned the full force of his remaining loyal military units against the uprisings. His helicopter gunships and tanks mercilessly crushed the rebellions. The revenge he took on the Shia was particularly vicious. Tens of thousands were killed, and many religious leaders were arrested or executed. In the south, he also targeted the unique culture of the marsh Arabs, who had lived for thousands of years in the vast wetlands at the junction of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Accusing them of helping the rebels, Saddam ordered the marshes to be drained. A massive engineering project turned a vibrant ecosystem into a dry, barren desert. This destroyed a way of life that had existed for centuries and created an ecological disaster, all in an effort to punish those who had dared to stand against him. After the 1991 Gulf War, the world was determined to make sure Saddam Hussein could never threaten his neighbors again. As part of the ceasefire agreement, the United Nations imposed strict rules on Iraq. The most important of these was that Iraq had to destroy all of its weapons of mass destruction, which included chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons, as well as the long-range missiles to deliver them. To enforce this, the United Nations sent teams of weapons inspectors into the country to find and oversee the destruction of these programs. Saddam's government claimed to cooperate, but the relationship with the inspectors was always filled with tension and mistrust. To pressure Saddam to comply, the United Nations also placed severe economic sanctions on Iraq. These sanctions banned Iraq from selling its oil on the world market and restricted the goods it could import. The goal was to cut off the money that Saddam could use to rebuild his military or his weapons of mass destruction programs. However, the sanctions had a devastating effect on the Iraqi people. Without oil revenue, the government could not afford to import food, medicine, and other essential supplies. Hospitals ran out of basic equipment, and malnutrition became widespread, especially among children. While the sanctions were meant to hurt the regime, they ended up causing immense suffering for ordinary citizens. Throughout the 1990s, Saddam played a constant cat-and-mouse game with the United Nations inspectors. He would often block them from visiting certain sites, claiming they were presidential palaces or important for national security. He would delay their work and accuse them of being spies for the United States. This behavior made the international community, especially the United States, deeply suspicious. Many believed that Saddam was hiding weapons and had no real intention of disarming. These confrontations led to several crises, including a series of American and British airstrikes in 1998 called Operation Desert Fox, designed to destroy suspected weapons facilities after Saddam expelled the inspectors completely. By the early 2000s, Iraq was an isolated country, cut off from much of the world. Saddam Hussein remained defiant, but his nation was crippled. The economy was in ruins, the infrastructure was crumbling, and the people were exhausted after years of war and hardship. The sanctions had created a humanitarian crisis, which Saddam blamed entirely on the West. He used the suffering of his people as a propaganda tool to gain sympathy in the Arab world. But in the corridors of power in Washington and London, patience was running out. The long standoff was heading toward a final, decisive confrontation that would change Iraq forever. The attacks of September 11, 2001 on the United States changed the world and sealed Saddam Hussein's fate. Although there was no evidence connecting Iraq to the attacks, the United States government, under President George W. Bush, began to see Saddam's regime as an unacceptable threat. The administration argued that there was a dangerous link between dictators who had weapons of mass destruction and terrorist groups who might use them. They claimed that Saddam Hussein was secretly rebuilding his weapons of mass destruction programs and could potentially give those weapons to groups like Al-Qaeda. This argument became the main justification for taking military action against Iraq. Despite a lack of international agreement, the United States and the United Kingdom decided to act. In late 2002, United Nations weapons inspectors were allowed back into Iraq, but they found no conclusive evidence of active weapons of mass destruction programs. Still, the United States and its allies insisted that Saddam was not fully cooperating. On March 17, 2003, President Bush gave Saddam Hussein and his sons a final ultimatum: leave Iraq within 48 hours or face a military invasion. Saddam, defiant as ever, refused. On March 20, 2003, the invasion of Iraq began. A coalition of forces led by the United States launched a campaign of shock and awe, with massive airstrikes on Baghdad. The Iraqi army, weakened by more than a decade of sanctions and previous conflicts, collapsed quickly. Coalition forces advanced rapidly across the country. On April 9, 2003, just 3 weeks after the invasion started, American troops rolled into the heart of Baghdad. The world watched on television as a giant statue of Saddam in the city center was pulled down, a powerful symbol that his long and brutal rule was over. While the city fell, Saddam himself was nowhere to be found. He had vanished, going into hiding along with his top officials. His 2 sons, Uday and Qusay, who were infamous for their cruelty, were later tracked down and killed in a raid in the city of Mosul in July. For months, Saddam Hussein remained one of the most wanted men on the planet. United States forces conducted a massive manhunt, raiding countless locations and arresting many of his former associates. Finally, on December 13, 2003, the search came to a surprising end. Acting on a tip, soldiers found him hiding in a small underground hole, which he called a spider hole, near a farmhouse in a town close to his birthplace of Tikrit. He was disheveled and surrendered without a fight. The once powerful dictator, who had lived in lavish palaces, was captured in a dirty pit in the ground. His capture was announced to the world with the words, "Ladies and gentlemen, we got him." After his capture, Saddam Hussein was held in a United States military facility in Baghdad for nearly 2 years, while a new Iraqi government was formed. The new leaders were determined to put him on trial for the crimes he had committed against his own people. An Iraqi special court, known as the Iraqi High Tribunal, was established to try him and other senior members of his regime. In October 2005, his first trial began. He was charged with crimes against humanity for the 1982 killing of 148 Shia men and boys in the town of Dujail. The massacre had been a reprisal for a failed assassination attempt against him in the town. The trial was a dramatic and often chaotic affair. It was broadcast on television, allowing the Iraqi people and the world to see the former dictator facing justice. Saddam was defiant in the courtroom. He challenged the legitimacy of the court, arguing that he was still the rightful president of Iraq. He frequently argued with the judges and went on long political speeches, trying to portray himself as a nationalist hero who had defended his country from its enemies. For many of his victims, however, the trial was a chance to finally tell their stories of suffering and to confront the man who had caused them so much pain. On November 5, 2006, the verdict was delivered. The court found Saddam Hussein guilty of crimes against humanity, including willful killing, torture, and illegal imprisonment. He was sentenced to death by hanging. He was also facing a second trial for the genocidal Anfal campaign against the Kurds, but the legal process for his first conviction moved forward quickly. His lawyers appealed the verdict, but Iraq's highest court upheld the sentence. The final decision was made. The man who had sent so many people to their deaths was now facing his own execution. The news was met with celebration in Shia and Kurdish areas, and with anger and sadness among some of his Sunni supporters. In the pre-dawn hours of December 30, 2006, Saddam Hussein was executed. The execution was carried out by Iraqi officials at a facility in Baghdad. Unofficial cell phone video of the event was leaked shortly after, showing him being taunted by his executioners in his final moments before he was hanged. He was 69 years old. His death marked the definitive end of a dark chapter in Iraq's history. However, it did not bring an end to the violence. His fall from power had left a vacuum, leading to years of sectarian conflict and instability. The legacy of his rule, the deep divisions, the culture of violence, and the shattered society would continue to haunt Iraq for many years to come.